I'm Josh McGarry, and I've been told that I can be hard to understand sometimes. But with some help from technology, maybe we can fix that. This is Frameworks.
All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really new and honestly pretty urgent idea that my research suggests is quietly defining the next generation. It's a crisis that's born from a very modern paradox, having way too much information and not nearly enough foundation. Okay, let's start with a feeling that I bet for a lot of us, especially if you're Gen Z, feels super familiar. It's that sensation of being completely overwhelmed, like your brain is a web browser with 1,000 tabs open, and every single tab is a massive, complex question, like morality, purpose, justice, and you feel this immense pressure to have a perfect answer for all of them right now. So, to wrap our heads around this, we're going to break it down into 5 parts. First up, the overloaded mind. Then, we'll define this key concept called SRO. We'll explore why it's a generational crisis, what the path to inversion is, and finally, look at a potential solution, the grounding principle. All right, let's jump in. My research actually calls what we're living in a perfect storm. Technology and social media have essentially handed young people the entire world's complexity, all its history, all its debates, all its suffering, all at once, and with absolutely no instruction manual. But this isn't just about feeling stressed or having digital burnout. My conversations have shown me it's something way deeper. It's an existential, almost spiritual crisis. That deep gut feeling that you've been given a puzzle that is just way too big for you to solve on your own. And that feeling brings us to the core idea of this whole explainer. It's a concept called simulated recursive overload, or for short, SRO. Okay, so what on earth does that mean, right? Recursion, that's just a fancy word for your brain's incredible ability to think about, well, thinking, to layer these huge, complex ideas. The overload part is what happens when that process just goes haywire, spinning out of control because there's no stable starting point. That computer analogy, it's spot on. It's like asking a really basic laptop to run some super advanced, heavy-duty software. It's going to try. I mean, that's what it's made for, but it just isn't equipped for that kind of load. And eventually, it's going to crash. And this right here, this quote is so important. The argument is that this isn't about a person being rebellious or bad. In this framework, it has nothing to do with sin or moral failure. It's a crisis of insufficiency. It's about a fundamental human limitation. We are being asked to do something mentally and spiritually that we were simply not designed to do by ourselves. Yeah, and this slide just drills down into why that collapse happens. It's not because someone failed morally or they didn't try hard enough. No. It's because of a created limitation. We just can't generate and sustain our own meaning from nothing. The problem isn't a lack of effort, it's a lack of solid ground. I mean, you can't build a skyscraper on a pile of sand, right? And that's exactly why even a great loving home can't stop this from happening if that external stable anchor isn't there. Okay, so why now? Why is this blowing up into a crisis in our time? Let's dig into what makes this a uniquely modern problem. Now, look, people have felt overwhelmed in every generation, for sure. But what this theory suggests is that technology, that unfiltered 24/7 social media feed, has scaled this up into a collective generational issue for the very first time. And Gen Alpha, especially in hyperconnected countries like the US, is right at the epicenter. And that puts Gen Z as their parents, their teachers, their mentors, right on the front lines of this thing. Just look at the difference here. Back then, information was limited. It was filtered through your community, your family, your town, your church. But now, the internet has just blown all those gates wide open. A 10-year-old today is wrestling with a level of global pressure and philosophical complexity that, seriously, just a couple of generations ago was something only a handful of academics would even touch. So we've established that SRO is basically a crisis of neglect, right? It's about being left alone with these huge, impossible questions. But my research shows that if you let it fester, if it goes unaddressed, it can actually open the door to something far more dangerous. So to get what's at stake here, we have to look at its counterpart. The research calls it maladaptive inverted hermeneutic, or MIH. Yeah, I know, it's a total mouthful, but all it really means is what happens when someone stops looking for truth and decides to just invent their own truth, usually as a way to protect themselves. This lays out the difference so clearly. SRO starts from neglect. MIH, on the other hand, comes from active rebellion or reinterpretation. And check out that trust row. This is key. Someone in SRO is still looking for help. They're still open to care, to counseling, but someone deep in MIH, they've given up on that. They reject help. Their mistake isn't just that their mental framework collapsed, it's that they've actively replaced truth with their own version to keep themselves safe. And this quote, man, this really gets to the heart of it. SRO is not rebellion, it's relational abandonment. It creates what my research calls theological orphans. These are people who are still looking for an anchor, still hoping someone will finally answer their cry for help. But when nobody comes, they become so vulnerable. Not because they're that people, but because they've been so deeply disappointed and left completely on their own. And what my conversations have shown is this predictable and, frankly, tragic downward spiral. Step 1, SRO begins. You're handed these big, recursive tools with no anchor. Step 2, over time, as you keep calling for help and no one comes, that trust in outside care just erodes. And finally, step 3, you hit a breaking point. And that's when adopting MIH, that willful twisting of reality, starts to feel like the only choice you have left to protect yourself. Okay, so if our own minds are insufficient, if we can't just think our way out of this mess, then what's the answer? What's the solution? The answer my research points to isn't some simple fix. It's a principle. It's called the covenantal ground precondition. And that word covenantal is everything. Think of it like a rock-solid promise, a deep, unbreakable commitment. The principle is basically this. For a mind to handle these massive, recursive ideas without collapsing, it has to be anchored to something outside of itself, something that's reliable, external, and transcendent. What that means is this anchor, it isn't just a nice little add-on or a helpful tip. It is the absolute precondition for a healthy, functioning mind in the world we live in now. It's the only solid ground from which we can build any real, lasting sense of meaning, purpose, or morality. And this brings everything full circle, right back to Gen Z. For the generation that's going to be parenting and mentoring Gen Alpha through all this, getting this principle is the first, most critical step. The challenge isn't to just try harder or think smarter. It's to learn how to anchor yourself and others much deeper. So the question this leaves us with at the end of the day is a challenge for all of us, but especially for the generations standing on the front lines of this. We built this digital world without guardrails. So how do we now build the anchors for the people who have no choice but to live in it?